Oyasosya City was alive with the sounds of music, laughter, and contagious cheer that followed the swirls of snowy updrafts towards a certain floating keep in the sky. But none of it reached the demon villainess, who sat slouched against her windowsill, watching the twinkling lights with a softness in her twilight eyes. A light, hesitant knock came about her door.
Demoness?
A human girl, no older than 10, with a nest of short, haphazardly chopped white-black hair, poked her head in shyly whilst clinging to the doorframe. Her right eye was carbon blue and hooded shyly. The demoness could just about see the edges of her patchwork brown winter coat and the string of her satchel. The demoness stretched with a yawn, her tail lashing about before curling in her lap. She flashed a lazy smile. "Yeah, Chanda?" Upon hearing her own name, excitement danced in the little girl's eyes. Her voice stumbled, flustered.
We're leaving now. For the solstice?
There was a slight pause, waiting expectantly, silence stretching. But the demoness stared back, tilting her head. Chanda fidgeted.
Okay, well, bye-bye then.
She gently began closing the door. The demoness almost sighed, only for the door to swing back open abruptly. The demoness blinked at the small child's sudden reappearance. Chanda's head poked into the room again, but she smiled excitedly this time.
I'll bring you back something nice, okay?
Chanda spoke fast, bobbing her head up and down. The demoness turned her gaze back towards the window. Sure, she waved her hand, and Chanda nodded once more. The little girl had a mischievous glint in her eye before she skittered off, closing the door with a gentle click. The demoness could hear the distant sounds of rapid steps hitting the stairs, before Chanda's voice called out with a tumble of excited words that gradually went from muffled noise to calm silence again. The demoness watched as her followers left through the double doors of her keep and began masking themselves with the help of the arcane to secure their descent into the city. The moment they did, that sigh finally escaped her. Quiet. Not entirely silent. There was too much white noise for that ever-present hum that constantly surrounded the keep. Concentrated arcane energy, a low hum of rapid chirps and cracks, like something gently breaking itself apart and finding synergy again. She liked it. There was a rhythm to it, like the flutter of a heart. But that was a feeling she couldn't entirely linger on. She had taken down the defense system to allow her adventurers to leave. Since they had left, it would be safer if she initiated it again. The demoness hopped up from her perch and began going through the keep. All the windows were covered in frost, and a light snowfall had begun to filter in outside. With each empty corridor and hallway she passed, the lanterns lit themselves, adding an odd purple hue to the darkness. The foyer stretched forever, the spiral staircase devoid of bustle, no drinks to clink in the tavern and no elegant bard entertaining the crowd of adventurers. Nothing. Every direction travelled outwards, and at every source was the quiet. All of them had gone for the winter solstice, to home, to families, to friends. Apparently, the mortals of the Empire liked to celebrate the sun's rebirth, which meant some symbol of freedom for new beginnings, becoming someone different, changed. The demoness didn't quite understand it, but she had heard chatter, the bubbling excitement to spend time with those they cared about. She found herself with a small pang in her chest. It wasn't too different from... Instead of the sun and some symbolism, it was a celebration of that year's harvest. They stayed up late, drank warm, fruity beverages, and spent time with those in the community, dancing to music and eating food they made for each other. Gifts could be exchanged, but they were usually given to children. And finally, when the evening drew to a close, twilight was at its strongest. All would gather around a large bonfire. A Sangoma, a diviner of fate, would read the people's fortunes in its flames. The thought made Astaroth's eyes shimmer. There was a warmth to home that couldn't be found in Josa, or even in the keep. That feeling of an embrace, an acceptance of knowing no matter what, they were always there. But then, there had been a change in the wind, and everything was different. Not a new beginning, but something else. She was so far from home that a celebration like this didn't matter. Shaking her head of her thoughts, she continued her way, winding wearily down dizzying staircases until she reached the deepest parts of the keep. It was earthier down there. Wooden flooring and polished corridors turned to cold, cavernous rock and pothole entryways. The air sparkled with small droplets of water frozen in space. Large crystalline spikes jutted out of walls, pulsating with a dull glow, lighting and dimming her path down. The Demoness's footsteps slowed as she reached the core. A large space filled with a domed ceiling so high it funneled into darkness. Thick vine-like cords draped from the shadows and hung themselves like snakes, splayed haphazardly around the room, along the walls and floors, before coiling around a large dark blue pillar. A small orb suspended in the middle, its chirping intensified and loud. As she approached, the room brightened with a reddish hue, and on the floors formed ancient circular shapes interlinking and growing out of each other like despondent art. The Demoness could feel the air shift at her presence, responding to her. It let her release a breath she felt she had been holding since she arrived on Jorsa. It was familiar. She smiled gently. Hi. She raised her hand in the air and felt the air change once more, chirps firing off in rapid response as she guided it around the droplets. Thanks for the help. With the snap of her fingers, the arcane cracked and sparkles shifted, beginning to rise like a moving tapestry. It transmuted itself into ancient symbols and letters, becoming a forest of equations. She had yet to learn half of what this did, but she knew this was the arcane matrix. And she knew the basics at least, such as a key was needed to open and close the shield that protected the keep. Almost done. She gently reached up and flicked the earring on her right ear. A small, harmonious chime resonated as it melted and flowed before shrinking and extended outwards into a non-Euclidean key. She grasped it out of the air and began to walk around the equations, looking for a certain configuration of symbols. Here I am doing maths whilst everyone else is having fun. She smiled to herself. At least I can take a nap after this. Her eyes lit up as she found the cluster of information she was looking for, a circular gap between the gathering of symbols and a strange slit shown in the middle. She inserted the key, twisted it. A dull boom pulsated out of the central pillar, the core, lighting up the room in shades of the horizon. For the briefest moments in the whiteout, Asta saw a figure, a female silhouette around her height. Then it was gone. The room dulled down to its normal hues, and having served its purpose, the arcane matrix reduced itself back to globules of water, sparkling iridescently. A small, harmonious chime with the hum of the air, and the key melted and formed into a piece on her ear once more. Astaroth blinked, rubbing her eyes rapidly. Nothing but a dull ache in her chest. Familiar. Before she could pull her thoughts together, she felt a gentle nudge on her ankle, accompanied by a small throaty bark. She looked down to see her shadowling, watching her with his many white and vacuous eyes. The red socket in his chest roiled about curiously, as if to see what she was trying to see. He was a small thing, barely reaching below her shin. 4-pronged horns were across his head, and several eyes decorated his face, all seeming to glint with a hidden intelligence, a row of sharp teeth and a forked tongue. To most people who were uninitiated, shadowlings can be daunting to see. Their forms were fluid, and they moved and reacted in strange ways. Marcus was different. Though monstrous in nature, Asta and many of her adventurers found him adorable, despite his hatred for the word. Asta's mouth twitched into a smile as she looked down at him. On instinct, she opened her arms, and with his shadowy wings, he leapt onto her chest before bounding up to the top of her head. He nestled right between her sharp purple horns, and though he had no pupils, she could feel his gaze expectantly, as if he knew what she was feeling before she had said it. She looked up at him as best as she could anyway. Bored? She kicked a stray, twisting root out of place and huffs. Yeah. Raised a paw and gently slapped the top of her head. An airy, smooth, boyish voice echoing inside of her mind. Let's go outside. It's nice out. Out? It's frickin' freezing. Astaroth shivered, feeling a chill already settle in despite the warmth of the core. Though his eyes were an endless white, she could feel as he rolled them. He tugged roughly on one of her long, pointed ears. Just calm. His voice urged playfully. 5 minutes. For me. Oh, she could never say no to that. Not for one of her oldest friends. With a sigh, Asta began making her way to the upper levels of the keep. Okay, 5 minutes. With the gentle ruffle of his shadowy body, Asta quickly headed towards the upper levels of the keep, towards the household apartments, the doors to the core closing upon the retreat of its master. Blood-red metallic frames and elegant geometric latticework decorated the windows of the guest room Asta wandered into. The room itself was draped in sheer fabrics of red dipping into deep gradient purples, swathing themselves across it, and creating a delicate canopy in which metallic lanterns hung low from the ceilings, flickering alive upon her entrance. She didn't really have a room of her own, or rather a room that was hers. The rooms were built less for function and more for the show. To show wealth, power, to show frivolity. None of them were made with her in mind. Despite being the master of the keep, it wasn't about her. So she bounced from room to room, picking and choosing where she slept. But never the master chambers. It didn't feel right. I like these rooms. He chirped. Reminds me of home. Just as empty too. Asta made her way over floor pillows, approaching a door that led out to the snow-capped balcony. The snow fell faster outside, and the lights of Oriososia City twinkled and sparkled like a sea of false stars. Stepping outside, a stiff breeze swept into the room behind her. Several moonflowers were planted and writhing, glowing under the coming twilight, their petals pure white, and their heads follow the path of the Demoness. She lingered at the threshold, cold air escaping her quickly, and her face scrunched into one of distaste. He leapt off her head, padded his way through the thin layer of snow that had begun to settle, and hopped onto the obsidian railing that overlooked the city. After a moment, he turned his head to look at her, and smiled as gently as he could with his rows of sharp teeth. Take a seat. The shadowling jested his tail beside him. Asta reluctantly complied. Fine, she grumbled, and with one simple motion she sat herself over the ledge. I'm sat. So stubborn, he tutted, shaking his head. Just relax, okay? Isn't the view nice? Asta looked, eyes squinted at the twinkling lights and tall buildings of glass and marble, spiraling and artistic. Creativity thrived in the Empire, making everything look pretty. I guess they clean up well. Can hardly see the mess I made 6 months ago. She kicked her feet to and fro. Moved closer beside her, then nudged her arm. It wasn't exactly intentional. His voice drawled in her head. That's beside the point. It's a nice view, right? Yes. It's a nice view. What was the point of us coming out here? Asta ran a hand through her hair, which was slowly beginning to get soaked by the incoming snowfall. I know your followers have all gone home for the winter solstice. He paused hesitantly, looking up at Asta, who fixed her gaze on the diminishing horizon. to know why you didn't accept the offer to go with them. Asta's eyebrow twitched, and she placed her hands in her lap. It's a mortal celebration thing, she shrugged. Besides, I'm a wanted criminal, remember? The only gift I'd be receiving is a swift armament to the back of the head. She chuckled dryly. I think, he began. You really wanted to go. You just didn't know how to give yourself permission to say yes. Asta opened her mouth to object, but the look on his face almost dared her to prove him wrong. Now you're here, and it'll be the first winter away from home. There was a silence that settled. The wind cried hard around the two of them, tousling Asta's hair as she looked down at the city below. The air dispersing parts of her body, scattering shadow to the winds. Asta's eyes softened, just enough that the glow of the city made them seem lilac. She had never been so far away from home before. There was something so nostalgic about the mortal celebrations, it just made her homesick. I just have to get used to it, she spoke quietly. It is what it is. Besides, if I wasn't taking so long to do what I came here to do, I could probably have gone home by now. She offered a half smile before looking out at the expanse again. There'll be other solstices, other celebrations. I don't have to be a part of this one. Her shadowling's expression crinkled, something akin to dissatisfaction if that could even be conveyed. He fluttered his wings and landed in her lap, paws against her chest as he stared up at her, a glint in his eyes. Who says we can't celebrate? He tilted his head. Asta leaned back at the close proximity, eyeing him. Why was he always so pushy? All right, get to the point. You're not home, I get it. But maybe we can make a temporary tradition while you're here. Climbed over her face and glided to the ground behind her, standing by the threshold of the warm interior. It might not be defining the future with fire or a shared banquet, but it'll be something not boring. Something that's ours. Asta hadn't thought of it like that. She liked the sound of that. And if it was anyone's company, she wouldn't have minded. Well, when you put it that way, she pivoted off the railing to join him. A smile began to brim onto her face. I don't know, it's almost like I've known you since you were a little demon. His voice reverberated coyly. Such an asshole. Asta nudged him with her boot. So, what are we having at? She walked side by side with the little shadowling, whose tail rocked back and forth in satisfaction. Well, Flora's embrace is definitely on the table. We should have some hibiscus somewhere. The shadowling's eyes squinted in thought. And maybe we can do a roast. Actually, on second thought, let's leave that. Wouldn't want you burning this place down. Hey, I can cook. They just have to be very specific small meals that aren't too complicated, usually pertaining to noodle packets. Asta huffed indigenously before cradling her chin in thought. We could season up some meat, pan fry it. Oh, we've got a shit ton of potatoes too. Oh, and we could even make some soup. Her shadowling smiled, watching the excitement almost possess her. A small relieved sigh escaped him before he padded behind her. Cake? For dessert? An attempt will be made. An attempt is good enough for me. Off the two went, planning and scheming a winter solstice that was theirs. Something familiar, but entirely new. The keep didn't feel so silent anymore. Perhaps warmth could be found there as well.